Thank you. I didn't do an opening on the last occasion, but I think I should on this occasion. History tells us that the Reaganomic experiment didn't work. Neither supply-side economics or its poor cousin trickle-down economics have lifted the masses out of poverty in the United States, let alone provided them with a decent standard of living. Over there, the fight for 15 is gaining momentum. They have to take direct action and lobby politically for an increase to minimum wages to federal, state and local lawmakers. They have to strike. They have to struggle. They lack a place like this or an act like ours to assist them. We, representing workers of Australia, are grateful to have a place like this and a law like the law we do. Grateful but not lucky. These institutions were not gifted to us. Their existence is an achievement also born of struggle. That poor cousin trickle-down economics has had something of a resurgence in Australian economic policy. Apparently, if you cut company taxes, low-paid workers will be better off. If you allow $10 million businesses to write $20,000 off their tax bills, low-paid workers will be better off. If you allow young people to work for $4 an hour, low-paid workers will be better off. We think that if you raise minimum wages, low-paid workers will be better off. Decades before the public relations experts coined the term trickle-down economics, we had rejected its ideological underpinnings, and we stand by that. The fight for $18.08 might not have the same ring to it, but that's what we're here for today. We recognise that we need to convince you that our claim can be accommodated within the framework under which you act, but we think that we can do that for two reasons. Firstly, our claim is about making an admittedly modest difference, but also a real difference to the position of workers dependent on minimum wages. A 2% recovery in a minimum wage bite at the low end, while still providing an increase in real terms throughout higher skill minimums in a relativity scale. A modest but real difference is something that is easily accommodated within the framework under which you act today. Secondly, and much more fundamentally, a real wage increase for the lowest paid workers is the right outcome, because the key criteria which guides you under this framework is fairness. The taking into account of each individualised item under the non-exhaustive lists contained in the minimum wages objective at section 284 and the modern awards objective at section 134 is also subject to an all-in judgment about the fairness of the safety net. Now that is significant. It is significant because it is perhaps the clearest possible indication that this tribunal's job is not to sit back and watch and let the market take its course. This framework is a deliberate intervention in market outcomes. Its edict is fairness, not tinkering. Regulatory interventions that require a person or an authority to act fairly pose a rhetorical question. What is it about this sphere of activity that prompted an intervention directed to fairness? And the obvious answer, of course, is that a policy judgment was made that without the intervention, the outcome would not be fair. The next obvious question is, to whom was the outcome judged to be unfair in the absence of the intervention? And the answer to that question identifies who the intended beneficiaries of the intervention are. I know I'm not telling you something that you haven't heard before, and it has a bit of a ring of economic power 101 to it, but it sets the frame for what it is that we're doing today. We are laying a floor and not pitching a roof. The analytical process is one of setting a fair minimum wage with the explicit acceptance of an assumption that that which is fair, that which is a fair minimum, is something that a free labour market would never deliver. The mere assertion of some generalised market distortion or lack of equilibrium that would attend granting our claim is no answer to it. Such a consequence is the natural and intended consequence of this tribunal doing its job. That doesn't mean that minimum wage increases, or in particular the minimum wage increase we seek, must be damaging to the Australian economy. Far from it. Strict neoclassical economists might posit otherwise, but in recent years their stranglehold on the orthodoxy of economic theory has thankfully waned. There is growing global recognition that rising inequality is inherent to capitalist economies and is a drag on economic growth, and that wage-led growth is a worthy and credible policy objective. The mainstream economic literature concerning minimum wages has gone beyond the study of imaginary boxes of perfect competition unaffected by information asymmetry or power imbalances, to now also encompass empiricism, monopsony and post-Keynesian approaches. And it is against that background that we submit that the granting of our claim is a good thing for the economy. It's a good thing for income inequality. It's a good thing for the gender pay gap. It's a good thing for social inclusion. It won't put people out of business or out of jobs. It will keep them there by fuelling aggregate demand. We don't accept the characterisation of current economic conditions in much of the reply material as accurate, and we observe that it includes observations that are somewhat remote from the sectors that are most affected by minimum wage setting. Recent economic growth has been above expectations. We saw some 300,000 new jobs in the last year, and recent, albeit modest, decreases in unemployment. Job vacancies are continuing to grow on trend. We don't deny that the economy is still transitioning from the mining boom, but it's far from going to bust, and the sectors who are most wedded to the wages set by this tribunal have positive features. Retail is continuing to exhibit year-on-year growth in turnover, and output is notably strong in retail, healthcare and hospitality services, highly award dependent. Money is being spent in the economy. The contraction of spending in favour of savings observed after the GFC has continued to reverse, and our claim is likely to further assist that trend. The restaurants, cafes and takeaway food businesses that are also heavily and vocally award reliant are included in the retail sectors that have seen positive sales growth. Business bankruptcies are at a 12-year low. And while labour productivity on all measures also continues to grow, the real unit labour cost growth is poor, a factor that the panel has previously accepted as evidence of a lack of cost pressures in the labour market. And you've also heard from Treasury this morning about some other positive features of the economy now and predicted into the future. Our trading partners growing faster than the norm in the pack. Conditions that are conducive to business investment, continued employment growth, and that the strength of the labour market is surprising, and Treasury aren't often surprised. Our opponents, for example, point to a fall in output in manufacturing. But the adjustment we seek to minimum wage levels could not conceivably have an observable negative impact on output in the manufacturing sector. It's hardly a sector that could be described as highly award dependent, and is far more affected by terms of trade and broader industry policy settings. Wider and longer term policy settings are the key to a better future for the manufacturing sector, rather than year-on-year adjustments to minimum wage levels that 75% of workers in the sector already exceed. Similarly, it might be true, as our opponents suggest, that there is a fall in output in the professional services sector, but we're unlikely to affect wage cost base in that sector by the task we're called upon to perform today. In any event, there's no data presented that suggests any fall in output is due to wage pressures among business customers of professional services businesses. Certainly, at the macro level, the RBA observed as recently as Friday that the year-end labour cost growth for 2015 was zero. In terms of the alleged hit on profits that supposedly make our claim fraught with risk, we've noted in our reply submission that measures of real net disposable income tell you nothing about wage pressures, particularly in respect of the workers whom we are concerned about today, and in any event in an environment where wages growth across the board is weak. Further, to the extent that the ABS Business Indicators Survey is relied upon to make assertions about declining profits, a caveat not raised in the argument by our opponents is the fact that the ABS does not measure gross operating profits for small businesses. From its own website, in relation to that data series, it says profits data are not collected from employing businesses with less than 20 employees. Estimates for these businesses are derived by applying sales information to an estimated profit sales ratio. Knowing, as we do, that workers dependent on minimum wages are more likely to work in small businesses, this is an important limitation. Now, our claim is modest, affordable, but also, and most importantly, is a claim that will affect a real and relative improvement in the position of low-paid workers. It's a claim that accords with the conception of fairness embodied in the Act, and we commend it to the Tribunal.